I'll just switch out. He's there. Well, I have a picture of myself in class.
Hello, how are you?
Hi, good. How are you?
Good. It's been a good morning so far.
Yeah.
Anyways, good morning, everyone. We're going to get started. If I have your attention, please. So today, it's still morning, I guess. You guys are going to be having a breakout with Professor Rob Sollenbeck, and he'll be talking about AI, an extremely interesting and very relevant subject in today's environment, business, etc. So if you guys will just give them a hand and
Well, thank you. Can you hear me? My voice? I don't know. It's a little rough today, so thank you. And I might not even be. Well, I'm good. I'm good. So maybe some of you have met me. I'm a professor here at the University of Alberta in the, what do we call it? Accounting and Business Analytics Department. I think that's just a fancy way of saying, like, that's where the tech is and the data and all that kind of stuff, and accounting. I guess a little bit about myself. I come from a technology background. I grew up with computers. I always say in classes, I remember when my parents got me my family, a Apple II in 1978, I think. And so it was kind of one of the first personal computers. And then for whatever reason, my parents always had computers for us after that Apple II. I don't know if anyone remembers Radio Shack. It's probably, far beyond your time, but they used to have a color computer where you could play video games on, a Mac, a PC, and sort of always had an interest in it. In our world today, I think we can kind of see where technology is and how important it is to business. And so the classes I teach are mostly what we call business technology management. If you're a student at the U of A, you kind of know what it looks like, but it really is just that intersection between business and technology. And I think there's always trends. And one of the trends I think we're seeing today is this idea of AI. And, I think I'm kind of using the title here, The Future Unwritten. We don't know the future. I think there was a riddle this morning that kind of said, what's always before us? And it's always before us, but we can't, what is it, catch it or something like that. But it's like, it's the future. Like, you just have no way to predict it. We can have all of the data models. We can have all of the predictive analytics, but the world will unfold in ways that we don't know. And so AI, I think, like any technological things, we don't know how it's going to be used. There is not a correct way forward. We just have to be willing to try things out and maybe make adjustments as we go along. The internet was that when I was a student. There was the same thing. The sky is falling. Oh my God, the internet. No one's going to know how to read. And here we are in the world today where we make use of the internet and it becomes very integral. And so I think AI is one of those technologies that is going to be around. I'm not sure the current iteration of it, where it's very profit-driven, is what that future looks like. But I think AI is going to be around, and I'm hoping to support us. And I will say, you as future leaders, you are going to make the decisions on what you're going to do with AI. You're going to be running companies. You're going to be starting companies. You're going to be adopting technologies, artificial intelligence. And so what I really want to do today is just talk a little bit about just some ideas I'm kicking around. I'm really going to turn it back to you. I've got a bunch of questions. So I'll sort of talk about a decade or a couple of decades and say, here's kind of some highlights of AI, and maybe think about that and how does that inform some sort of future. Just my background, I really do come from industry. So I was in IT departments. I kind of see IT departments these days either being outsourced or the traditional IT department work is just done by business professionals now. And so the classes I teach are really like, just be prepared to do this. You're not going to get IT to write a report for you. You will just write that report yourself, and you're sort of figure out where the data comes from and what it means and how to format it and how to share it and how to protect the data and NDAs and all of that kind of stuff. So this is from my background in an IT department. Since I graduated with a computer engineering degree in 1997, I think. So long time. So I will say to you, I'm not an expert on artificial intelligence. I am not even good at math, like casino night, and I got to add two things together. Like, that's going to be really tough for me. I'm not a data scientist, right? I'm just someone who has some experience with technology and sort of see how business is using it, and I'm comfortable with experimenting with things. So it's kind of I'm not a neurologist. I don't know how the brain works. We talk about neural nets and those kinds of things. Like, don't ask me to write a neural net. I'm first of all not interested in it. But I think we're at a point in the development of AI where they're really commodities. And now what do you do with it? It's like Microsoft Word or something like that. I got lots of questions, maybe even fewer answers. So hopefully we can have a bit of a conversation. I hope to get you to start thinking about some of the problems just you're facing. I mean, I'm going to have one question, I think, like, what's the biggest problem facing the world today? And it doesn't necessarily have to be a technology question, but if you look around you, I think the world has changed a lot. And for myself, I'm really positive about the future because I see people like you in the room like this. I think you truly do care about people and care about yourselves. And so I think, you know, how do you solve these big problems? We talked about the Jasper fires. You know, everyone had sort of ideas. There was some overlap, but I think the thing that got the notice by most people is just like, you're trying things. You're sort of, you know, have some big ideas and maybe you don't know all of the details to implement it, but it's worthwhile having those big ideas. You know, that's how the US landed you know, astronauts on the moon. It's how, you know, Google and Apple and, you know, all the big companies, Amazon, sort of, they try things and they're sort of charting their courses. So I definitely will run out of time. I'm going to try and keep an eye on it here. I'll be done by noon because I'm career fair after this, I think. So I don't want you to be late for that. So here's how I'm going to structure this talk here. I was actually a little bit just kind of offered and said, hey, if there's an opportunity to speak, I'm happy to take it. And so I think late last week, I kind of got the email and like, okay, sure. And so I, over the weekend, kind of put something together. And I sort of thought I'm going to break it into past, present, today, and it's kind of very blurry. And then we'll sort of talk about the 30s. So I started to see the past, the 1950s to the 2000s. So raise your hand if you were born in the 90s, 1999, 98, anyone? All right, so before your time, but that's when I was a student at university. That's when I started my career and I sort of saw the technology. Present, I'm just calling the 2010s. Today is sort of the 2020s. So kind of broad categories. And then the future is sort of, I think, any time after, you know, sort of the 2030s, 5 years from now, like what's it going to look like? So I'm going to try and choose some milestones. And I will say, I thought I had the disclaimer in here somewhere, but maybe I don't actually have it, is I did not use an artificial intelligence to write any of this. Like I didn't use it. I wanted to just search. I'm not saying there's not images in here that aren't generated by AI or maybe even text that's generated. I do use a lot of Wikipedia. I'm like, I'm going to go to the resource everyone likes, Wikipedia, you know, fully trustable. And so I wanted to go through and just pick out some things that I saw in my life, maybe informing some of the questions that we're facing today. And so it's always good to kind of look at the past and go, well, how did we deal with this 20, 30, 40 years ago? We started seeing these problems come along. And so in the past, when we look at artificial intelligence, maybe you've heard of the Turing test. Alan Turing, he was kind of a scientist, a computer scientist, came up with this test that said, if a human can have a conversation with a computer and they're unable to determine whether that's a computer or a human, then the computer is said to, or the artificial intelligence has said to pass the Turing test. And that kind of blurs the line between what is a human and what is an artificial intelligence and what is it capable of. So this goes back to the 1950s, right? You're testing the machine's ability to have a conversation. And so the way it was administered was you have a computer on one side, you know, a human on the other side, and another human that doesn't know who they're talking to. They would just get sort of responses. And so this was kind of the thoughts in 1950s. I was born in 1970, so 20 years before my time, but already kind of thinking about that. That's literally 75 years ago. So it's not like 100 or 1,000 years ago. So I would say kind of fairly modern implementation and questions around artificial intelligence, even within, you say, my parents' lifetime. ELIZA, has anyone heard of ELIZA? I think there was one student I talked to earlier, but ELIZA was a first attempt at natural language processing in computer systems. And so the idea was ELIZA was a psychologist. And so you had ask questions and you'd it would respond based on your answers. I remember playing this on my Apple II, or the Apple II the family had. And it was really kind of interesting to see, even in I mean, I didn't play it in 64, 67, but that's when it was developed. And the idea was you'd kind of give it an input. It would determine what you're saying and sort of give, you know, a response back. And the attempt was to have a conversation, right? It was sort of around the exploration of communication, which is what humans are really good at, right? Both verbally and non-verbally. And so ELIZA didn't sort of know what you look like. It was all based on how you type. And so just an example of maybe what we're seeing today, but, you know, from the 1960s, the 1970s, you know, it was the 1980s when I was, early 1980s when I was sort of playing with it, but it kind of gave a sense like, here's what technology looks like. Anyone play video games? I remember when Pac-Man came out, I actually did a book report on, or a report on it in elementary school. I was just fascinated by this game. Didn't have the internet, so you didn't have a lot of information, but it was one of the first video games that sort of used AI to guide the ghosts around the maze. And it was kind of a big deal. I mean, we look at the video games of today and we see the AIs in it, and yes, it's maybe even hard to determine if it's a human or some sort of bot. But you know, we're sort of late 70s, early 80s, kind of the dawn of video games. I think the Nintendo Entertainment System came out in 1985, so you know, shortly before that. But you sort of see this explosion, and this is where a lot of AI development was in things like video games and toys. It wasn't kind of used by business, although business did sort of look at these kinds of things and say, like, how can we make use of this? But you know, once the personal computer became adopted by business, this became something that organizations were looking at. Deep Blue, anyone know Deep Blue? It's kind of IBM's sort of first supercomputer, famous for winning 2 games against Garry Kasparov, who at the time was the world chess champion. And you know, chess is a complex game, and so it was a big deal for Deep Blue to build to beat a human, because it sort of required maybe a bit of abstract thinking to look at a board and sort of think what the best way forward was. And so this was broadcast on the internet. Actually, Microsoft was one of the sponsors or the organization that sort of put it together and broadcast it. I remember watching it at work. It was a kind of a big deal, and it was kind of that one of those steps. And like now, these computers, these AIs are starting to become almost like humans. I'm not saying, you know, this is exactly like humans. It was very good at playing chess, but maybe not so good at other things, and so very sort of specific kinds of AI. Whereas I think what we're sort of seeing today is you know, artificial. I'm not saying general intelligence exists, but it's kind of like good at many things, right? And so like the Pac-Man AI was good at playing Pac-Man. Right? This Deep Blue was good at playing chess, and that's about it. Obviously, I know you're thinking Watson and all that kind of stuff, and it was kind of a stepping stone towards that. If you look at some of the challenges, so I'm going to kind of break this down into sort of, you know, just these snippets of milestones around artificial intelligence. If you look at some of the challenges here, well, one of the big challenges was that we just didn't have the computing power. Like we just did not have enough processing power to do what we need to do. It's why AI has kind of sprung up today in the 2020s, is because now we have access to cheap, massive amounts of computing. We just didn't have the resources to do this, up until I think at this point in time. The internet didn't exist. I mean, yes, broadcast Deep Blue on a video at maybe 240p resolution, like nothing like 4K or any of that kind of stuff, but it didn't have the ability to connect computers together like we see today. In 1976, computers were still millions of times too weak to exhibit intelligence. And so we were just hamstringed, the human race, by the computing power. The breadth of knowledge, artificial intelligence, like vision, natural processing, needs enormous amounts of knowledge. And Wikipedia sort of says this idea of common sense knowledge. Like, think of what you know just innately. Like when you are walking, when you see someone on the street, you sort of recognize them. And that's where I'm saying I'm not a neurologist or I don't know how the brains work. But we know how to tie shoes. Like, how do you tell it? You have to train a computer how to tie shoes. And so the idea was that we just didn't have the knowledge, and we definitely didn't have the knowledge in a digital format that we could use to train. The large data sets just did not exist that we see today. And so another reason you're sort of seeing the explosion of AI at this point in time is there's just massive amounts of data. We call it the internet. That, I think, raises its own questions, its own concerns, but we're in a point in our world right now where we do have access to these data sets. I think there was a bit of disappointment in some of the AI here, and so there was a kind of a cold winter, or I'd say like a Cold War or something like that when it came to sort of funding AIs. We just didn't see the improvements, probably because lack of processing power, lack of data. And so just not a lot of money was put into the research. And so in the, I think it was the 80s, 90s, you just sort of saw a drop off. That's obviously changed now, but it was really, sort of didn't seem like it was a good place to put money. And obviously that's changed. And then there's always the ethical questions. And that's where I kind of want to look at to you guys as future leaders. Where are your ethics? What do you want to do with AI? And that's where I sort of go to these kinds of questions that I'm going to propose to you. Is like, does anyone want to share, like, when did you become aware of artificial intelligence? Was it a video game? Was it a bot on a computer? Was it Grammarly or spell checking in a Word document? Where do you guys sort of see where's your first sort of interaction where you know it was AI, you sort of knew that it was a computer thinking, or thinking in quotations for you. Does anyone want to share? In the back of there first, and then chessbots. Yeah. And that's when you knew a computer. I mean, man, I tried playing against chessbots. Could you beat them? On level 1. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Anyone else?
Yeah, probably like PS came out and had some of the games which you could play against computers. Like I saw one of them was like baseball. Or even playing like Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah.
That's fully like AI models. So there's computers.
How old are you? How old are you guys? How old are you playing chess and Grand Theft Auto? Like 6 or 7? Yeah. 10? Anyone else like first sort of thoughts, experiences with AI?
Like playing Mario Kart on your like first Wii when you're like 4.
Against the 9 other drivers or whatever it is? Yeah. Video games. Anyone? Yeah. Yeah. And did you think, like, did it bother you that it was an AI? Like, did it just, it's the way it was? Yeah, that was better. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But very, sort of one function. Playing games, I think. What issues related to artificial intelligence were you aware of? Was that something you gave thought to? And remember, this is kind of like the 2000s, so you might just be born at this point in time. But were there issues that you sort of faced, other than losing all the time? Yes.
A lot of us have had like exposure to AI since we were kids, but we never really thought about it. We just thought, oh, okay.
That's just the way it is.
I feel like now looking back, like now there's like the ethical issues and stuff like that. So I think like taking that experience and like taking that into the future, that's like how we'll go.
Yeah, and I think that's part of, like, that's a good point. You didn't really maybe even know that there were issues. It was just the way things were, and maybe that's a challenge. And now what you experienced in the past is maybe now, okay, informing what you're thinking about in the future. Yeah.
So like
Mm.
against AI and playing friends,
Two different things, yeah.
like speaking to AI, what you're trying to get off what you're saying. But I don't understand what you're trying to say. It's like if they just can't prepare it yet.
Yeah, so I guess, does modern AI pass the Turing test? I don't know. It's like, and maybe this is a question I want to ask later, but it seems to be relevant right now. It's like when you use, say, something like ChatGPT or any of the GPTs, like, do you chat with them? Do you say, hey, how's it going? And are they your friends? Or is it more, as you said, like less emotional? Like there is a human aspect that's missing there. Does anyone chat with ChatGPT? Hey, how you doing?
Well, so recently, I think about the previous update, they have released like a voice over communication with ChatGPT. I was just kind of curious, like what the interaction was. So I started like having a conversation in English, and then I switched over to French, and now I switch over to Jamaican. So like having like this expression, I think AI is getting to a point where it's slowly getting better with a human interaction. But yes, there are still some flaws, but yeah.
Yeah.
But I do always say like please and thank you.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, thanks for the answer. Yes. Do you trust? I don't know if I have that on there, but do you trust what comes back from the AI? And that's a broader question. Like, how do you know, right? Like, I could tell you a bunch of stuff. I could be lying completely right now. Like, like I really didn't have an Apple II, and so humans can lie, but we're gonna go over here and come back to you guys. Yeah.
Initially, I didn't trust it much when I first started using it because I don't know how good the data that I'm getting, so I used to double check everything that I used to get.
Yeah.
Then I got better at prompt engineering, and then the voice.
So do you chat in your prompt engineering, or are you just sort of directing it, giving it instructions?
Not when I type, but now the voice thing is there where you can actually like talk to the AI.
Oh, wow.
So then, whenever I need to do like some brainstorming for any idea that I have in mind, I just have a conversation with the AI that I'm thinking this. What do you think about that? Then, or if I figure out some loophole myself, then I tell
Yeah.
the loophole to the AI, and then I ask.
So you train it.
And then so it's like a nice conversation to have. And then I ask you to make a Google Doc of everything.
Would you go for a beer with the AI? Yeah, exactly. Anyone over here?
Well, I'd say I kind of trust AI less now, but in a good way, because when it came out, like relied on it a lot, but now that it's actually so good, it can make about stuff, you actually kind of force you to fact check yourself. more.
Yeah.
So I think the better it gets, the more I don't trust it. But also, like I said,
Has anyone gotten a self-driving car where you sat in the back seat and the car drove for you? Like, do you trust it to do that? Like, I haven't had that experience. I know maybe we don't have it here in Canada. I'll go there and then come back to you. Yes. Mm.
So then I'll ask it specific question. This is my question. This source.
Yeah. Do you find that that data is not in there? Like, why do you upload it? Because it doesn't know that, or you're just saying this is the specific knowledge?
AI can just write out something.
Yeah.
It all sounded as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Having that, kind of like that covered was the case.
At least you're giving it a corpus of information that you're. Yeah. Exactly.
One time I put in, like, I needed help with a health question or something, so I put it in and it gave me an answer. Felt wrong. Like, are you sure?
Yeah.
And it gave me a completely different answer. Like, it wasn't sure.
Yeah. That's math, you said?
Yeah, and
Calculus. Yeah.
sometimes it's like, I know I had a friend who like used it to like write an essay or something, and it gave like complete fake sources.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, and I think it is learning, and that's why I sort of asked the question. Like, okay, you upload it, you give it a book or a file or a set of slides from a class or something like that. Now, maybe only your instance knows of it, like, and that's where I think a lot of kind of the unknown is like, now who knows that? Like, why did you have to upload that? Didn't someone else already do it, or does now other people have access to it? And I think that what makes it tough. There's my question. What do you think the biggest problem in the world is right now?
I think a lot of us
Yeah. Well, and that's a good statement. And why? You don't have, like, my thoughts are, you just don't have a lot of time. It saves time. We only have 24 hours in a day, 7 days in a week. And boy, you guys do a lot. Yes.
Biggest problem that we have with AI right now, it's nothing to do with itself. It's about the government. Like, I figured that there's two main things going on, and it's like, it's upgraded, it's getting better and better every single day, and it's like the laws and regulations couldn't follow with that.
No.
It takes like forever for them to do something, right?
Yeah.
Like, no, yeah, but so like now there's a lot of like gray area that you just don't know if it's legal, if it's allowed, ethical, or something like that. So that's why deepfake happens, and and I think that's the biggest problem that I have to solve right now at the second.
Right. Okay. Governance. Yeah, basically, and I might agree with you. I'll go middle one.
Actually, I just want to talk in addition to this. The first time when AI came out, like the OpenAI came out, it came out as an non-profit, right? And after that, it just get changes to a company now, and it's like a business now. Like a lot of government agencies are like control of it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a conspiracy theory, right? That it's like if you type on ChatGPT that I'm kind of thinking should I say it or not, but it's like
Hey, you can say it. I mean, we're all anti-corporate here. Yeah. Anti-capitalism.
if you type on ChatGPT that hey, could you please tell me about how is Joe Biden or something like that? Yeah, he's gonna say, hey, Joe Biden, you're so old and wise. And if you go type about something about Donald J. Trump, and he's gonna say that hey, we can't talk about certain political figures, right?
Yeah.
It's all trained and it's all in control of.
Well, I mean, human biases.
Yeah, I was going to say the last question.
Yeah.
I think the biggest problem is like I think in certain areas it can be I don't think it's beneficial. For example, like if somebody's in science teaching or medical school, I would maybe not trust them that
Yeah,
much, just because I feel like certain stuff you want to be a little more diligent in your research. Even like
So context matters then.
absolutely
Yeah.
Even like if you learn how to code, like it can be helpful, but you don't want to rely on it because you don't have to think about
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it goes back to the time saving.
I would say one of the problems might be the opposite of what someone said earlier. Is that I think sometimes people might not be using it enough.
That's
Like for like when I'm working, for example, some of my colleagues don't really know about Copilot, even though we all have a free subscription to it. And it really helps. For example, like you have like a 2-3 page report and you want to summarize it in a couple bullet
Yeah.
points. I think that's when Copilot can be really handy. I know a lot of my coworkers don't know about it. So
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
Well, and I think, I mean, I might even call that a digital divide, right? Like, not everyone has access to high-speed internet like we do in North America here, right? You know, there's people, probably third to half of the world's population doesn't have access to high-speed internet, and now we're expecting them to have access to AI, and I agree. There's some people that just aren't aware of it and don't know, and maybe I fall in that category. I'm just not sure how you guys are using it. That's why I'm asking the questions, going like, what are you using? What are your expectations around it? Would you trust it? Why are you using it? Why is it so important to you? And I'm just interested in the answers. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but there are students I know of that just aren't interested in using it and are they now at a disadvantage, right? And that's sort of the question. Do you think it changes your ability to learn? I'm not sure. I would say it's your ability to learn, but it's maybe how you learn.
Yeah, kind of the same thing. Like it depends on the context that you use it in. Like I agree in some areas you should use it more. I like to kind of do what other people say where I'll upload my own notes and I'll make it have like condensed into summaries or something. But I think it was one of the keynotes yesterday was talking about a lawyer that used like AI to write their case and came up with like completely wrong like precedents and stuff.
Yeah.
And so the ethical issue of like, especially as a lawyer, you have a lot of responsibility and potentially somebody's life in your hands. So you have to kind of watch what you're using it for and where you're using it for, because I would not want to pay a lawyer to defend me with AI.
Well, and someone, I had a conversation, I think, with someone at supper too, and they said, well, maybe you pay a lawyer and they're just doing what you could do with ChatGPT.
Yeah.
So why am I paying you to do what maybe I could do myself rather than, but can I trust it? Right?
It's also what you're actually saying, you give it such a broad. So he is always that's just when I criticize what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Because if you just put in it will make up something. Again, it's not human, so it's not going to differentiate itself. Something that's real life or something that
Yeah, I think that's like common sense knowledge, right? It doesn't have common sense, right? Yeah. Yeah.
This is what it is. And you do.
Yeah.
Make sure it's fact checked. And it does it to listen.
Does anyone use Perplexity AI? I like that because it gives you the references and those kinds of things, which, you know, sort of get maybe some of the background. Now, some of the background may be garbage, I think, but yeah. Another one back there and then over here and then you. At least right now.
And then it'll like walk you through the steps how they made it. And like, it's like there's a lot of loopholes.
Yeah.
The wrong person can.
Exactly. Well, it can be abused, and that's where the ethics maybe comes in.
I think another thing is that like whenever it comes to AI, a lot of people just remember OpenAI and ChatGPT.
Yeah.
There's so many other tools out there. Like I think there's a recent one, it's called Astral AI. It's a company that recently raised, I think, $14 million, and that's like a complete marketing AI. Like it's think of it like Jarvis for marketing. You can
So very specialized knowledge. Like it's the chess computer for marketing.
You can tell it, okay, this is my product idea. I want you to identify my potential customers.
Yeah.
It's gonna do that, and then it's gonna.
So what's the point of going to school then? Like that's where I'm, you know, like, is that good? Is it something we can use? I'm going to just go on. I do want to get to maybe a few more slides, but go ahead.
I'll say that in security in the stock market, I spoke to people and they did mention that, well, we're always gonna need humans to, verify people or anything, but I feel like with a group AI, like they're just not comprehend how much is gonna go here. And there's going to be a demand for less people in the company, and I feel like a lot of people are going to cut. And just like, for example, before the internet, like we have a finance class where we have like one class.
Yeah.
But before the internet, they were more professors.
Yeah, exactly.
And now we're just all of the things of like AI. Like maybe we need, I don't know, like Calvin, for example, we need two accountants to run over like something that would have taken like 50 hours.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's just, there'll be less demand.
Well, I think that's the digital disruption, the, sort of, whatever the term is, but that's where I'm sort of looking at, like, who's making those decisions? Like, maybe it is okay to have 60 accountants or 50 accountants or 400 professors, but I don't know. Going back to the money side of things, there's always questions about that. Let me just go to the present, which is like, I'm saying 2010. So maybe you were in junior high school at that point in time, maybe even elementary. Autonomous car was a big deal. Google's, sort of self-driving car. That's why I sort of came with the idea. Like, I'm not sure I'd get into these cars right now, particularly not in Canada. I know if you travel around the Anthony Henday, there's a corner that says something along the lines like self-driving test cars along here, and it's like, driving a self-driving car in winter, like if you drive in winter, it can be a little bit challenging. Well, now put a computer behind the wheel that doesn't have sort of that knowledge of ice and all that kind of stuff. Google was they sort of spun it off a Waymo, but I thought it was really interesting. I didn't kind of put two and two together, but the whole idea behind Google Street View was they were taking pictures of streets so they could say, like, here's what a stop sign looks like, here's what the traffic lights look like. So again, you need that data, right, in order to get a self-driving car to work. We all sort of recognize the world. That's our common sense knowledge, but now we've got to teach a computer every single bit of that. And so Google, did send the cars out. Apple's doing it in their Apple Maps. Like Microsoft's doing it in Bing Maps. I mean, who uses that? But the idea was, like, we needed data so that we could take the next step, which is this self-driving cars. Virtual assistants, I mean, Alexa, Siri, I think. Is anyone using Apple Intelligence, the new version of Siri on their computer? Is it, or on their phones? Does it work? One question I was going to ask some of you, and maybe we can save it for a bit there. Does anyone pay for, the pro versions of some of these AIs? Or are you sort of free? So a few of you. Yeah, do you notice a difference? I guess I have never paid for it, and maybe I'm just cheap, but you do notice a difference? Okay, well, that's interesting. I remember Google Now was going to be the big thing, and they sort of with their assistant, but now it's all like Gemini and ChatGPT. Here's another one. Everyone familiar with AlphaGo? This is from DeepMind, a spinoff from Google. Google purchased them, but if Deep Blue could beat Kasparov in chess, AlphaGo was the AI that beat the best player, Lee Sedol, in Go. And Go is just a more complex game. It's more pieces, it's more moves. And the interesting thing about AlphaGo at the time, 2016, I think, is when it was when AlphaGo beat Lee Sedol. It didn't kind of have a library of data, like a database of games, like a chess player does, or a chess AI does. It learned and it taught itself how to play Go and ended up beating the best human player. And so that was sort of thought that it was going to be a few years later. And so I think that's really what kickstarted where we are today in 2025, was just the AlphaGo and some of the models that enabled it to play. I just want to throw something here. I know this is a lot of Google, but Google sort of is, I think, a research institution. Just image. I just wanted to bring in the idea of images, recognizing being able to reverse search images. Requires an understanding of what's in an image. Us as people, really good at looking at a photo and going, oh my God, that's my friend, and that's, a mountain and a tree and a bird, and there's my dog and all those kinds of things. Well, we've got to teach AIs how to do all of that kind of stuff. And Google Lens comes along, and you can sort of take a snapshot and do searches for it, and it'll bring up web pages. I know all of the modern smartphones, but in 2017, that was kind of a big deal. It's only just exponentially changed. Some challenges that I think we're facing today. Again, we've talked about the elimination of jobs. I think I found an article in here, and I'm happy to share these slides with you at some point in the future. I'm sure there's somebody just reach out to me. But it was really, sort of this idea of automation. Now, what's the difference between automation and artificial intelligence? One is kind of thinking and acting like a human. The other one's kind of just, replacing mundane tasks. But if we put them together, I think that's where a lot of the challenges are today. People train AI. So how do we identify a bird or a dog or a cat? Well, someone actually has to go and say, well, here's, these group of pixels, make a bird. What's happening is a lot of our sort of big tech firms are outsourcing that to marginalized people in not only North America, but throughout the world. And the kind of interesting thing is like they're training the AIs to replace their own jobs. You know, as AIs become better at identifying things, then you can start to train. And I think that's where there's a bit of concern. Like computers can start thinking for themselves. You know, what happens? Right now, we're sort of still in charge, and maybe going back a bit to the policies and the governance around that is going to be challenging. But you know, maybe we don't think about the data workers, the data labelers. Maybe you've done some of that. I know at least. I'm just looking, someone had said they'd done that at one of the AI companies here in Edmonton. Part of the job was just to identify pictures, a little bit manual, a little bit maybe tedious, maybe even a little bit boring. But we don't have these AIs today without that kind of role, that job, building these huge data sets. It's one thing to go, hey, we got the data set, but where's it come from? How do we build it? How do we clean it? Well, sometimes it's not a very nice way to do that. Lots of questions around the use of AI in art, creativity. I mean, humans are pretty good at being creative, writing, painting, making movies. What happens? I think you probably all saw the strike in Hollywood around AI use in movies and TV shows and those kinds of things. Well, I think those questions are going to continue to be asked. And what do we want as society? Education. I think you're all students. I'm a professor at the school here, and I'm really questioning these kinds of things. But it's really interesting to see how you guys are using it, your sort of expectations of it. Really useful in sort of the idea generation. But maybe we're next year going to get to the point where like you can get AI to do everything for you. Then what does that mean for school? What is about critical thought and critical thinking, which I think is what makes us humans valuable. So how do you think AI will change education in the next 10 to 20 to 30 years? Like you guys are going to be the future teachers, you know, whether it's in a business, whether you're going to have kids and they're going to be in, you know, like what do you see the future of education with AI 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now? But what does that mean? Like that's like, okay, so you know how to use AI, but now you're a dentist. Like, how do you learn to be a dentist when AI is out there, or an accountant, or that's like I agree. Yes, we got to use it ethically, but what does work look like? Okay, yeah, a partner. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. So working side by side with that. So in education, that would be like I've seen sort of the idea tossed around that AIs become your tutors. You know, you're working side by side with someone. I'm gonna go just over here.
It's gonna help education and we help it proper. Because I don't think it's gonna replace anything. I think it's gonna make you smarter. It's another skill set to use AI. You just hop on AI, ChatGPT, and ask it something versus step learning how to properly answer your prompts. You're gonna get two very different results. And in terms of output, AI is just gonna help your output.
Do you see that from a teacher perspective or from a student perspective or both? Student perspective?
I think whatever, as you learn to use it properly, your work output in school and work as a lawyer, dentist, whatever, it's going to be that much better if you have assistants and you're not because we're going to see better work in the next.
So do you think we'll get down to like a 10-hour work week?
I hope so.
Like, because if you become more productive, then maybe there's an expectation that you're just going to continue to work more. Like, I don't know, shouldn't we, like if you're going to have an AI help you do your job much more efficiently, then what does that mean for a work week? Or what does work look like? Anyway, I'm going to just go on, but that's a good question. It's interesting. Yeah.
A lot of the time people don't use their brain, like to shoot a quick intro with their perspective, steering on the right person, to write a piece, a lot of people use AI to write a paper. So I feel like it's just going to start the growth of the brain because they're not using their brain a lot of the time, especially the things that require us to spend time research, that and stuff. Like I can put this ChatGPT 5 resources for this, and these are the things that I haven't had.
Yeah.
You know, taking the time to actually work that stuff. So I feel like there's definitely for a lot of people skills that require you to learn. A lot of people are going to study and pass the exams using ChatGPT, but they don't have it in their brain. You don't go so far.
Yeah, yeah. I think I mean, I see both sides of the story, and that's why I think what makes this so challenging, and that's why I say like the future is unwritten, like we're unknown. We don't know what it's going to be, but I hear stories that people like pilots, because of all of this assistance in flying a plane, they just don't know how to fly a plane anymore because they're so used to the computers. I know there's a lot going on in the world, but I'll just go this way, and I'm halfway through, so and I got 10 minutes left, so we may not get done. But go ahead.
So as you said, the future is unwritten. So I think there could be two scenarios. That one scenario could be that teachers gonna make their student learn AI in schools and stuff, so that they could learn it and they could be good at it. And there could be another scenario that the school's not gonna teach anything about AI, and for our kids, we have to like hire some private tutors and make them teach AI and how to work with AI so that they could compete with the crowd and to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're getting into that sort of digital divide as well. Like some have, some have not. I don't even know what the have side is. Like maybe have is not having AI, and the haves are the ones that have it, or maybe at a bit of a disadvantage. I don't know. Like it's a very challenging. Yeah.
Well, it's kind of touched on here, but it's the same thing to that stuff on mobile, like all that stuff just accelerated. Like you said, thought that
Right.
and actually learning and excel our ability.
Yeah, anytime there's change, new technologies, like we go through this period, like, oh my God, what are we doing? How do we make sense of it? Like, I still think social media is one of those things that I'm not sure we've got a handle on it, on its effects in the world. Like just everyone being able to have a voice. Now we've got AIs that can create information that may or may not be true, and lots of influence up there. And I think we do need some time to figure it out. It's been what, 2 years since ChatGPT? I think it was 2022. Yeah. Yeah, I know. That is a tough question, because on the one side, I kind of look at it and go, well, I think this is the future. Like it's like Grammarly, it's like Word. I mean, if a company decides not to use that, they're at a disadvantage. But I think, when we say, well, we'll work side by side with it, well, what does that mean? How do we, learn to work side by side? How do we still answer your question, think critically and be able to solve problems? But I'm not sure, having age restrictions on it is part of that. And I guess I would say, I don't know what the right answer is, but you guys will figure it out. Because, just like we're sort of figuring out, the internet and those kinds of things, like there was no sort of right answer on how to use it. It's kind of here. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. Is it useful? Yeah, I think all of us. I mean, if we all came here, I was just talking to the previous speaker, and maybe my Wi-Fi is not working. All of a sudden, it's like, oh my God, we don't have access to the internet. What do we do? And it becomes, almost a part of like a requirement, an essential service. And unfortunately, not everyone in the world has it. So you raised a good question. I don't have an answer, but I don't know if banning it's the right thing, but I think we need more regulations around it. Maybe governments do need to be a little more involved in it. Age restriction. Yeah, yeah. Like drinking. Like an age 18 or whatever. Yeah, social media, maybe something like that too. Like, there's lots.
I definitely think there's downsides, but like according to like economic leapfrogging, like as developed countries, they get more innovative, developing countries will also follow and lead. So as AI gets advanced in like the developed world, education can be even more like proliferated in developing nations, so that can help.
Yeah, and the whole education is interesting to me. Like, are we testing you the right way in 2025 for the tools that you have? Like, who loves memorization exams? Memorize everything, and like, okay, because you're good at it, probably. Yeah, but it's like, how does that reflect in the real world? I don't know, and that's I think a lot of educators. I'd love to go talk to people who are teaching teachers how to be teachers. Like, what do we do? How do we sort of assess people's knowledge? If you're going to be a doctor, how do you? Of course, I want someone, if they're going to. I always use the example of open heart surgery. Like, I'd like someone who actually passed something, before they start, operating on me. But if we got AIs to do it, well, do we see different jobs? Okay, what do I got? 5 minutes left? 5? Let me just go through this really quickly. Just generative AIs, I think you're sort of all familiar with it. Creating text, creating images, huge problems with kind of image generation, deep fakes, video. so what's the name of it? Sora, I think is the one I think that's the example there. But it's not perfect, but give it 3 years, give it 5 years, and all of a sudden, these kinds of tools become much more capable, a little more scary at that point in time. Health, I think, is going to be a big thing going forward, using something like AlphaFold to look at protein folding and maybe looking at how certain molecules interact with other molecules. Again, I'm not a health or a doctor, but I do see, like, man, if we could cure cancer or Alzheimer's or dementia or something like that using AIs, I think that's a good way forward. Lots of challenges, I think, in our world today. Deepfakes, lots of sort of like revenge porn, fake news, bullying, like all of this kind of stuff is really challenging. And I don't know if and I don't want anyone to share anything, but like, how do you sort of navigate that world? Do you look yourself up online and see what images are? Like it can be quite scary out there. And a lawyer, can't remember her name, Goldsmith, I think, out of Florida, really supports people who have been sort of abused online, and she'll sort of say something along the lines of all online crimes are offline because real people are affected by it, and so kind of a bit of questions on laws and how do you enforce laws, particularly on the internet, where I say in class, the internet doesn't know where Canada starts and the US begins or Mexico begins. There's no sort of geographic borders on there. So how do laws apply? And that's, I think, a huge challenge. Biases, I mean, I'll just leave it there. I think we're all sort of aware of biases in this. You're all people, you all have your own biases based on your backgrounds. But, when you've got, tools like facial recognition, at scanners, at airports and those kinds of things, tends to favor or not be able to identify people in certain ways, and that can cause issues. I just threw in here the whole idea of regulations, laws, guidelines. Those of you who are thinking law at some point in your future, like, I think this is going to be an important part of that going forward, like kind of making sense of what this this online world looks like. And critical thinking, right? That I found an article here on from Microsoft in the last week that just kind of says the reliance on it, I think, is a little bit what you're talking about, your sort of creative or critical thinking skills. They're like a muscle if you're not exercising them. And I think those are still important, because thinking for yourself, making decisions is an important skill to have. And if we're kind of giving that to an AI to make those decisions for us, like, what does that mean for us? And that's why I say, as individuals, you all have to kind of think about what that looks like. Let me just go through the future and then maybe just wrap up with a couple of questions here. Research. I think all of you sort of said I use it to plug a bunch of slides in there and do research and maybe start to make sense of a bunch of information. Here's the second path of AI revolution, focused on creating new tasks. So jobs exist today that didn't even a few years ago. And so I think there's an opportunity for lots of new jobs to come along. Robots, you talked about working side by side with robots with artificial intelligence. I mean, I don't know, Blade Runner, anyone, I guess? Agriculture, and I just threw this in here, it's going to be a big problem feeding the population on the planet Earth. We're going to have to find ways, sustainable worlds. I mean, I'm hoping there's a planet that it doesn't heat up so much that things start to go away. Big challenges, weaponization of technology. I think we're kind of living through some of that right now. You guys are sort of seeing firsthand what that might look like a little bit. Whole idea of zero-day bugs and that kind of stuff, where we're not disclosing those and maybe causing problems. White-collar jobs, I think there's lots of sort of questions like, there's an article out there called Bullshit Jobs. It's from 2013. It's, David something. But I'd say we sort of created a lot of these kind of white-collar jobs, and we're finding those are the ones that are being automated now. And how does that sort of affect, what the economy looks like? Artificial general intelligence. I think there's lots of cautionary tales about that. That's computers kind of being smarter than us as humans. I've heard varying views on that. Like, an artificial general intelligence might treat us like an anthill in the backyard. We just kind of mow over it, or we're not being cruel or anything like that. And there's sort of thoughts that an AGI might just treat us humans as kind of a bit of a nuisance and wipe us out. I think I have the idea of Terminator coming along. Existential risk, catastrophic risks, maybe not directly related to AI, but I think it's sort of that technology. Obviously, losing control of AIs can be a bit challenging. I think we're sort of facing that today, but there's lots and lots of challenges that you're going to be facing. I think every generation faces them. And so I think what it means, like, I really look at you guys as the future leaders. You are the future leaders. You are going to be inheriting the earth from your parents, your grandparents. And, I sort of did the same thing. I kind of don't mind shutting the lights off my house because, my kids are going to have to clean up the mess that, our generation made. And so I think I'm really positive about that future, but it does require that sort of leadership and critical thinking skills. I'm just going to kind of skip through this and sort of leave it here. You're going to need knowledge. You're going to need your ethics and understanding. That's sort of the critical thought piece of it. And communities, like building communities, maybe not with thousands or millions or billions of people, but maybe it starts with an individual and their friends. And that's what I really like about events like this, where it's like you get a chance to build a network with people, a small community. And I think that's where change is going to come from, just individuals rather than like, okay, we're an organization of 100,000 people like Google or Apple, and we're going to change the world. I'm not sure it works like that. All right, I'll leave it there. Any other questions? 2 minutes. Thank you. Okay. One question?
Do one question.
Okay, one question or comment.
So I really relate with your line about how like the AI in late 90s basically beat the grandmaster in chess. So what I want to talk about was there's a Moore's law that technology evolved like 5 times the speed, 3 times the speed every 5 years.
Yeah.
So what do you think as a business student who wants to be a business owner, or some individuals want to be an employee? So what they could do so that, what should they do so that they can't get replaced by AI? Or so in this digital era, what are the things which could be beneficial?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question. I think I'm not sure I have a good answer for that, but I would say critical thinking skills, problem solving skills, applying tools, technology tools, to help you solve problems. I always say in class, like, be the ones that know the technology that's going to replace things rather than, being a bit like, that's never going to happen to me. Let's take that offline because I mean, I need a beer to talk about that kind of stuff. But I think that's the challenge. That's the unknown. Like, I really don't know what it looks like. If your boss decides not to hire you and replace you with AI, like, that's not your decision. I don't know how we do that. How do we change the mind of your boss to go, you know what, it actually is worthwhile having people working for me? I think that's the challenge. I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but I think we got.
Okay, we're out of time. So thank you once again.
Well, thanks. And I'm really happy to be here. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, that's awesome. I'm very you did this. Yes.
Once you figure out what group you're in, group number 1 will be going to the Nook, which is across from the restaurant. It's right next to Bo Berkeley. Some of the executives will be standing there. They'll leave you there.